Hi there, folks. I'm Commodore of the Higner Maritime Artworks collection, and what you're seeing here is just one of about 300 different pieces I've made since 1994, and this is called the Majestic 2. The Majestic 2, and there was another one before it, belongs to the Madison Cruise Line, which is just a name for a company, if you will, that forms a collection within the collection. There are different fleets here, and there are different nomenclatures and traditions attached to each company and to each ship within each company. Madison is a name that I developed years ago and folded and then brought back because I wanted to bring some variety into the overall collection as I'm showing each piece. And this one came out this past February. And if you know, or if you look back at some of my pieces from before, and I have an archive, you can kind of tell that there is a lineage there, that some of the forms and some of the styles from before have been translated down the way to the shape that you see now. It's mixed media, it's cardboard, it's got Christmas lights on there, tape rolls as tables, fabric as the carpeting, other people's artworks and prints and so forth that are all credited and hung up on the inside to enhance the interiors. It's just like a regular cruise ship or regular kind of hotel. And it's got all the various amenities you would expect to find in a modern hotel, a modern river ship, or something out of Viking River cruises. That kind of ship is what you're seeing. There's also a plastic sled here from AeroPro, a Canadian manufacturer, and I buy these in bulk, like 5 or 6 at a time, to be able to make each of these. And this is actually an alternate version of a larger class called the Australia class from another company, of which there are 8 of those. And each of those reference different parts of the world, like Brasilia and Laurentia and Scandinavia and Australia and so forth. Now, what's important about this particular piece, though, is that this tends to be, for me, a kind of activist piece in this way, because while I was building this and angling and giving this company a break again, if you will, within the whole spectrum and the lore that I come out of, and that what this comes out of too, the Ukrainian situation got really bad, of course, and we saw everything that you saw. One of the things as artists that I think we tend to look at when these stories come out about Ukraine and about Iraq and so forth is what happens to the culture, what happens to the archaeological, the artistical situations. And what happens to the artists that are in those communities? Where do they go when other forces, if you know what I mean, come in to basically, thin out the culture? Well, actually, as that whole situation was going on, I realized that the color palettes of the ship tended to match not only the Ukrainian flag, look at it, it's red and yellow and blue anyways on the outside, but on the inside it happened to work out very well in that I installed a number of Ukrainian-born artists on the inside of this. All the art you're seeing on the inside of this are all from Ukraine, essentially, or Eastern Europe. And sadly, there are a couple of people displayed in here whose original artworks have been confirmed lost in northern Ukraine at this point. So some of their originality is gone, and so what this has become is a kind of tribute piece to those people, to everybody, of course, over there, but especially for the sake of being here, the artistic, the cultural, the spiritual aspects of that place. And this is to not only to commemorate, but to maybe inspire, maybe to kind of add to the rebirth of that area, because one day there will be peace there. One day there will be a kind of reckoning one way or the other, and we'll be able to return to the time when they'll be able to express themselves as an independent country amongst the nations there. So the Majestic 2, yes, it's a fun piece. It's very colorful. I had a lot of fun doing it, as I usually do with, especially with pieces this big. But it's also a little bit of a message of hope and of memory to some of the people who are there right now and who want to not just live, but to create again, essentially. So in the future, this will sail along to other places, like as you see it. And it's just been an honor to be in this gallery, by the way, too. And there are a lot of incredible pieces. And as you look around, of course, there are a lot of other messages to take from them. So thank you very much for having me.
Are there any questions?
It does float, right?
It does. And in fact, a lot of my later ships these days have actually been built on plastic slates rather than cardboard hulls, as I usually used to do them, because they just kind of fall apart after a while. The gravity kind of sets them down, even though they've got hot glue, and the construction methods have vastly changed over the years. I tend to do it this way because I think that they'll last longer, the center of gravity is down, and that as these pieces eventually go out into the world, and I hope to sell a few or donate a few to various institutions, that they'll tend to last longer in those areas. I'll tell you a fun little story. I used to go with my family, of course, to Olcott Beach up there, and they got the old concrete finger piers that used to relate to the hotel complex up there where Kroll Park is now, way back in the day. And I would put, my earlier versions in the water with a bit of rope hanging out the front there, and I would sail them along, just between the piers and just make them sail. And so they lived. Like I said, they had cultures. I didn't really think of like imaginary people exactly, but I created scales for the eyes to wander in, for the eyes to be the passengers, for the eyes to be the wandering specters in there, enjoying the spaces, and not necessarily caring if there's a doorway there or not, or whether or not the pool happens to be sitting where the cabins would be underneath, right? It's beyond the point. These are abstract pieces, as the late Bruce Adams said so well in his article about my show over at the Castellani, that he said that this was a kind of jazz. It's not a literal ship. It's more like a jazz thought experiment on what the freestyle of this is. So that's where I guess that's where I was always kind of coming from anyways, and rather than have these be just toys to knock around, I wanted them to be, in fact, they became art pieces, and they also became a statement about green, about using used materials, found materials we don't normally find, and making good use of that. I call it terra deco, an organic earthen deco, where you can still follow the sweeping modernistic forms, but also have them relate to something very earthy, very cyclical, and what you mentioned from before, that beginning, middle, and end to all things. And I feel like this is a postmodern expression in a sense too.
We had an opening here, a member show opening a couple years ago, and we had pizza, and you snagged all the little plastic tables from inside the pizza cartons.
And you know what? They're generally used as like chairs. Like I'll put a backing on them and then put them side by side of each other inside the veranda cabins and use them for other things. These are containers here, and these are yogurt cartons, straws, the tape holders right here, and various other decorations from just anywhere I find, and I'll just turn it up and stick them in the ground, and you never guess a lot of the time what they were originally.
Well, I was going to suggest that you've made a conscious decision to not imbue them, disguise them, make them look factory made, but make them look as anything but that they were found objects put together to this whole.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that's a conscious decision not to make people think it really plastic.
Right. There's a order as much as there's a disorder to it. There's a culture around it, and I got to give it to the Titanic, of course, and other things that inspired what these eventually became. I enjoyed the atmosphere, the times. Granted, of course, any era of history is going to have its controversies. We know where that all comes from. But I enjoyed the atmosphere. I enjoyed the decorative styles over the years, especially Edwardian, Art Deco, and Art Nouveau. And I think there's a lot that we're seeing that we're going back to those now, in one way or another. Maybe this is my way of complementing that trend, going back to earlier styles and exuding those. Maybe it's because we don't always know where we're going anymore with regards to art and architecture, honestly. And it's useful, both as an artist and a historian, for me, to be able to look back and pull those things forward that worked for everybody. Even though we had challenging times, there were certain things that still worked. And the majestic, too, again, is that experiment in shape and form and function, even for what it's made of. And again, I'm continuing to build more of them. And I hope to display a whole fleet of them once again. So we'll see where we go from here. Anything else, by the way? Okay. Thank you again so much for having me.